people are looking at Gaza as a reflection of the rest of the world, where, you know, the rules don't matter, where international law doesn't matter, where UN resolutions can be ignored. And I think that sets a very, very dangerous precedent, because actions like these, they're not only a betrayal for the people of Gaza, but they're actually a betrayal of the safeguards that are meant to keep us all safe.
You said people back home see the United States as complicit in what's happening?
They see it as an enabler, you know. So clearly the U.S. is the country that has most leverage over the U.S., over Israel. And like I said, you know, it is the biggest ally and biggest supporter. And the Arab world is getting, the rest of the world actually is getting mixed messages. So on the one hand, the U.S. is demanding that more aid rightfully go back into Gaza. At the same time, they're denying that the starvation is intentional. On the one hand, they are outraged by the attacks on the aid convoys, but at the same time, they're denying that Israel is violating international humanitarian law. There's an expression of concern over civilian deaths, but at the same time, there's a provision of offensive weapons to Israel that are used against Palestinians. So, in a sense, you know, when you try so hard to thread the needle, you can risk dropping the ball. You can risk letting your values and principles unravel, and that has a deep impact. So, for example, even when the U.S. allowed the UN Security Council resolution on the ceasefire to pass, the next day there was an announcement saying that it's not legally binding. UN resolutions are absolutely legally binding, and these legal frameworks are there to ensure that all countries adhere to a standard of conduct. They're either applicable to everyone or they're not. Either everyone is accountable or no one is. So the next time a country breaks the rules, you know, and the U.S. comes and tries to apply more authority, those countries are going to say, well, you made an exception here, so why apply it to us? So I think people, you know, we are seeing Israel falling short of moral standard after moral standard, legal standard after legal standard, and the world is refusing to act. So I think Gaza now is like a microcosm of our New World disorder, of the breakdown of international norms, of the return of might is right. And I think that's very dangerous, not just for our region, but for the entire world. I always try to remind people that, you know, we have coexisted, Christians, Muslims, and Jewish people for the longest time. That's where the three monotheistic religions were born. And prior to the birth of Zionism, the Muslim majority in Palestine lived in complete friendship and tolerance with the Jewish minority. There was never an issue of anti-Semitism there.
Well, you know, historians will argue anti-Semitism has been present throughout history, right?
Yes.
And it is hard for people to hear some of what you're saying and not react in that way, where they hear a characterization of criticism of the Israeli government or the Israeli military and see where you're separating from Jewish people. Right. A lot of people don't hear a difference.
Anti-Semitism is absolutely present, and it's been on the rise, it's been on the surge, and it is the worst kind of bigotry, it is pure hatred, and I always say that Muslims have to be at the forefront of fighting anti-Semitism, because Islamophobia is the other side of the same disease, and it's also on the rise. Judaism is a religion of peace. It is the first of the three monotheistic religions, and as Muslims, you know, it was Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. We all believe in the same God. And the issue is when you try to conflate anti-Israeli policy with anti-Semitism, right? Anti-Semitism is when you persecute somebody or you discriminate against somebody based on their Jewish identity. Israel is a state. It has political policy, political parties. So you can criticize the state of Israel, but that's not necessarily anti-Semitism. So when people stand up and speak against the war in Gaza, when they're talking about speak against the collective punishment, when you deprive people of food as a weapon of war, when an entire population is displaced, when there's indiscriminate bombing, that is not anti-Semitism. That is speaking against Israeli policy. And I think it would be wrong to hold the Jewish community responsible for the actions of or the policies of Israel. And many Jewish people absolutely reject this conflation. They want to protect their Jewish identity and say that the Jewish faith has existed 3,000 years before the birth of the State of Israel. Well, because, for decades, the dehumanization of Palestinians has been an intentional approach that Israel adopted in order to numb people to Palestinian suffering. It's actually quite surprising to see just how deep the undercurrents of dehumanizations run. Israelis have pretty much, Arabs are generally accused of teaching hate, and Palestinians as well. But Israelis have actually walled Palestinians out of sight and out of mind. It's kind of reduced them to nameless, faceless security threats that you have to defend yourself against. They don't learn about Palestinians. They're never introduced to them as real people. Any attempts to bring Palestinian stories into books are barred. So this sense of, and we actually saw that, among the people blocking aid into Palestinians were young teenagers. I can't understand how anybody could be so indifferent to human suffering.
You're talking now about some of the protests that are trying to interrupt the shipment of aid into Gaza?
I am talking about a deep culture, an omnipresent perspective about Palestinians that says that Palestinians are subhuman, that they are violent because of something intrinsic in them. It's something in their nature. It's not because there's violence inflicted on them. And so when you reduce people to a violent, people who are different to us, so they're not moral like us, so therefore it's okay to inflict pain and suffering on them because they don't feel it the same way we do. It allows people to do bad things. That's the mental loophole of dehumanization. It allows you to justify the unjustifiable, to do bad things and still see yourself as a good person. And we're seeing that happen in the case of Palestinians. But dehumanization works both ways, because when you lose your ability to empathize towards the other side, you become hardened yourself. It degrades your own humanity. And we're seeing this happening in Israeli society, where they've become so hardened. And I just want to urge people to understand that this narrative, this propaganda that's been fed, this anti-Palestinian racism, that Palestinians do not want peace, that Palestinians only understand the language of violence and force, that is incorrect.